Okay, look at this. This is a potato. And honestly, what an interesting looking little guy. It doesn't look like it has achieved much in life. But don't underestimate it. This thing has traveled across continents, changed the diets of millions of people, played a role in one of history's worst famines, and somehow ended up becoming French fries. So today, we're talking about the potato. And trust me, this is way more interesting than it looks. Let's go back about 7,000 to 10,000 years. We're in the Andes Mountains of South America, around modern day Peru and Bolivia. This is where people first began cultivating potatoes. And they weren't growing just one kind. There are thousands of potato varieties: purple potatoes, red potatoes, yellow potatoes, tiny potatoes, big potatoes. Basically, potatoes had an entire extended family before we even knew what a potato was. And here's something really interesting: a potato isn't actually a root, it's a tuber. The plant grows these underground tubers to store energy. So while the plant is growing above the ground, it's basically keeping its emergency food supply underneath. And then humans came along and said, "Emergency food supply? Interesting. We'll take that." Thousands of years, potatoes were mainly grown in South America. Then, in the 16th century, Europeans arrived in the Americas. And eventually, potatoes were taken back to Europe. But Europeans didn't immediately fall in love with them. They were suspicious. And honestly, I get it. Imagine someone handing you a potato for the first time. It's unfamiliar, it grows underground, and they're telling you, "Eat this." You're probably thinking, okay, but why? It took some time, but eventually people realized potatoes were incredibly useful. They could grow in different climates, produced a lot of food, and were relatively easy to cultivate. And slowly, potatoes spread across Europe. And there's a reason potatoes became so important. They're a good source of carbohydrates. They contain nutrients like potassium and vitamin C, and they're capable of producing a lot of food from relatively little farmland. That made them incredibly valuable, especially when food security was a major concern. But there was a problem, and this problem would eventually become catastrophic. In 19th century Ireland, potatoes had become a major part of people's diets. For many poor families, they were an essential source of food. Then, in the 1840s, a plant disease called late blight began destroying potato crops. And it wasn't just one bad harvest. The disease kept returning. Imagine planning your entire year's food supply and then watching the crop fail. The consequences were devastating. The Irish Potato Famine caused widespread starvation and disease. Hundreds of thousands of people died, and millions eventually left Ireland. And this is one of the darker lessons from the potato. Having a highly productive crop is great until an entire population becomes too dependent on it. Suddenly, our little potato isn't looking so innocent anymore. Okay, so I was going to tell you what happened next to our little potato, but honestly, I've been editing this video for way too long, so we're going to save the rest for part 2. If you actually want to know what happens next, you'll have to come back for that. And don't forget to subscribe because I put way too much effort into this video. Seriously, you have no idea. Anyway, bye! Bay! Go away now. I'll see you in part 2.